Welcome to A Therapist Buddhist in You. My name is Luke Du Bois, and I'm here with co-host Zaw Mall, and this is a collective solution to healing.
Awesome. Here's Zaw. Good to do this again, Luke.
Yeah.
Good to see you here.
Glad to be here. So what do we have in store for everyone today, Zaw? We were able to learn a little bit more about you and your knowledge and skill set, and I hope to do some of that today.
Yeah, I think, the thing behind our title, Recovery Collective, it's already, I guess there's an implicit concept that recovery is related to, which is addiction, So maybe we can do an interview, help me understand what addiction really means from your point of view. And why don't we do that? I think that will be helpful for people who are suffering from addiction, and not only that, people who love the one who are in addiction, So this will help understand what that means. So yeah, I think that's a good topic to explore into.
Yeah, I think that's a good one of the things that we'll highlight frequently on this podcast is, man, if we can find a collective solution for that epidemic, then we'll be doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in the substance use and addictions field, since I was 22 years old. And so I guess coming up on 15 years, give or take. I'm a science major, not a math major. But it's always been a passion of mine when it comes to my professional career. Like you, I'm also in recovery, and I got sober at the ripe old age of 20 years old, so I've never had a legal drink. I'm sober off of all mind-altering and mood-altering substances, legal and or illegal. Things are changing with that. And I never, as we talked about the previous episode, I never saw myself going into the field of substance use and treatment facilities, but I felt like I was guided there somehow, and I was thrown into groups at a really young age. I started working in the field of addiction at 22 years old, and I assure you, I did not look 22. I was a very young 22. I probably didn't look in my age till I was in my early 30s. But they certainly threw me in, even though I wasn't a certified addiction counselor or a drug and alcohol trainee. That's what they call it here in the state of Maryland. I took to it like a sponge, right? And I spent extra time. I sat in with groups with the other, the dinosaurs of the treatment world that I worked with that had 20, 30 years of doing treatment work, and I just got to take a little bit. And I took from their strengths and got to blend it with my personality and the things that I do well. And so I've always done group work. I've always done, whether it's educational, formative groups, and that evolved into process groups with what we often see in intensive outpatients, where I call it the here and now type stuff. And if you can get a good facilitator, a group leader that can really help them with their recovery in the here and now, and connect what someone's going through and their current situation with other group members, that 90 minutes can be a blink, and it's powerful work. So I've always loved doing any and every form of group work, whether it's, like I said, processing, and I worked with an adventure therapist for many years, and just to see people experience and not just sit in a classroom or a circle with chairs, and for them to experience things together. And we often see that through quote-unquote adventure therapy. My mentor, Mark Secreta, often said, I think it was a Plato line, that you can see more in an individual at an hour of play than a lifetime of conversation. And what he meant was that person is going to show their true self interacting with people, whether it's through play or through action. And I got to see people's behaviors. I got to see people, how they interacted and communicated. I got to see people's defects in this experiential exercise, which helped me in all of my work, whether it's through individual and eventually being a clinical director of a treatment facility and helping not just the individual person as a clinical director, but the whole community. And that group work really helped me do so.
Yeah, so why don't we start from the very basics? As you mentioned, I'm also in recovery, but I didn't get sober as early as you did. But there was a turning point in my struggles when the disease model was introduced. So why don't we start from there? Because, I can put myself in my parents' shoes who are in, Eastern culture in Asia, who are also very devout Buddhists, and they thought it was a moral issue with his son.
Mm-hmm.
Why can he not stop? And I also thought it was a moral issue. What's wrong with me? So from the disease model, what does addiction mean? Yeah, why don't we start from there? Let me put myself in my parents' shoes and ask you the question. Yeah, what is this thing that my son is suffering from? What is addiction, Luke?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, and something that comes up frequently, even for people that are suffering with addiction or abuse. It's the choice argument. Why can't I just stop? Right? And there's, in some ways, there's some validity to that. But what I'll do with Yuzo and the listeners is there's a great definition of addiction that the ASAM, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, put together, and they put it in 2 paragraphs, and believe it or not, that's just the short form. There's a much longer form. What I like to do is break down this description and what I want people to be mindful of as we kind of break this down and work through it together. It does 2 things, I think. It gives people a different perspective of what addiction is, what it can mean, and it makes it personal, because even though you might not have a addiction to substance use, but you can look at through your lens at the same time. So let's get started, and we'll see where it goes. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
So I'll read, and once again, this is from the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and I always tell people that there's a lot of people that got in a room with a whole bunch of letters behind their name, a lot more than I did, and said, this is the definition of addiction, right? So there's a lot of meat in these 2 paragraphs, and we'll simplify it, and we'll see how it relates to you if you have a substance use issue, or you're in recovery, or the family member trying to seek help. I want to understand a little bit more. So let's start there. Addiction is a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Dysfunction in these circuits leads to characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. This is reflected in an individual pathologically pursuing reward and relief by substance use and other behaviors. All right, I said there's a lot in that paragraph. Mm-hmm. So let's break it down. So when you hear primary, right? Addiction is a primary, and treatment centers, people often say this has to be your primary focus. When you hear that, what does that mean to you? Addiction is primary.
Yeah, the way I interpret it is, is the root cause of everything else, which also implies that they are secondary. So that's my understanding of that. But also, I guess, before that too, the word disease can be helpful too, to associate disease with addiction, because disease can be visible, cancer, any kind of, hepatitis, any kind of disease with an organ, it is understandable. But when it comes to the disease of the mind, and it's a primary. So why don't we start from there?
That's great. I mean, I think where I'm at in my life and my recovery, words help me. I don't stumble upon them, or they don't prevent me from moving to change the way they used to when I was a 20-year-old kid saying I can't be an addict, I can't be an alcoholic. where I'd read things and I felt like, that was me, but that never happened, so I can't have a disease, right? So a disease in some ways is pretty simple. It's an abnormal condition that negatively affects the structure or function. So in that definition, there can be a lot of diseases out there, right? And we can look at it in another way, that in addition to the abnormal condition, with addiction, it changes how the brain responds in its functioning. So we'll break that down in the definition, but it changes the way we think, feel, act. There is a brain change. There is a negative effects to it. But to keep it simple, it's an abnormal condition, right, which causes disease. We'll often hear it say simply, it leads to dis-ease, but there's reasons for that medically as well. You're right when you said the word primary, right? It's a primary focus. Now, the medical definition is not associated with or caused by a previous disease or injury.
Gotcha.
And that really tricks people up. Over the years, I've heard people say, gosh, if that doctor didn't give me those opiates from my sports injury, then I never would have been hooked. If it wasn't for that car accident, or often like the chronic pain, that I never would be in this situation. Or if I never experienced that traumatic thing that happened to me when I was younger, I wouldn't need to numb out and I wouldn't be an addict. Now, there's some truth to those things, right? But it is my belief, and this definition, that it's never just one thing. And that holds true to what we do at the Recovery Collective. If we take a holistic approach, we said it last episode that, yes, you can have high blood pressure, but if you just change what you eat, yeah, that might affect it, but there's even more benefit if you work on your stress level and exercise and look at yourself holistically. Primary, right? That it's not associated or caused by a previous disease or injury. We often had people at the facility that I worked at as a clinical director, I need to go. I need to leave, right? And you'll hear people say they're leaving against medical advice or against clinical advice. I'd ask them, why do you need to go? You've been here for 6 days and you're ready to go because you're no longer shaking and baking and sweating and vomiting. And and they would tell me, I need to get back to work. And my family needs me, and there's financial stress, and those are all legitimate reasons to leave. And I empower them. They're right. Those are important reasons to potentially leave, but isn't the work stress one of the big reasons why you keep relapsing? The financial concern of continuing to relapse. So there's a saying that anything you put in front of your recovery is often one of the first things you lose, meaning addiction can affect everything. And this first paragraph says it. It says, dysfunction in these circuits leads to characteristic biopsychosocial and spiritual manifestations. So another way to say biological is physical. When people get to the level of residential treatment or detox, that there's a physical change happening. Whether you ingest it through consumption, through whether it's alcohol, right, to the stomach, whether you smoke it through the lungs, whether you inject it through IV, all of these substances are affecting the body and the brain. Hey listeners, we've got something extraordinary to share, a chance to reshape your journey no matter where you are. You're familiar with Zalmal's insights on our podcast, but there's more. Through the Recovery Collective, he offers life, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and meditation groups guiding you toward a fulfilled and mindful existence, no matter your location. Zal's journey from a Burmese Buddhist novice to a skilled practitioner equips him with timeless wisdom and contemporary strategies. Whether you're navigating life's shifts, seeking clarity, or pursuing self-awareness, Zal's coaching serves as a compass guiding you toward success. The best part? Zal's approach centers on your growth and empowerment. He equips you with tools to tap into your inner strengths for continuous evolution no matter where you are. Ready to take that next step in your personal growth journey? Connect with Zalmal and the Recovery Collective at 240-813-8135 from anywhere in the world. Investigating in your journey reaps immeasurable rewards. Let Zalmal guide you toward resilience, clarity, and empowerment no matter where life finds you. Now, let's transition back into our conversation, Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep your journey growing.
That is very helpful to know. When I see the word disease, I think of treatment too, or cure. But when there's a word chronic, that's more of like a treatment than a cure. And the counterpart is also, if there's an injury, it can be fixed and you're all set. But if it's a disease, it needs to be treated. So like that example that you were using of this person who was struggling, but then he's like, oh yeah, I'm all set now. So let me just get back to work, get back to normal, as if he does not have the disease. So there's that component of maintenance, that if there is a diabetic person or any kind of medical condition, there needs to be a treatment.
And that's a great example, because diabetes, also like COPD and HIV, these are strokes, Alzheimer's, these are chronic diseases, meaning these are the Sandlot movie, forever. These are diseases that are with you and don't have an end-all be-all cure, meaning they have to continuously be treated. Say this not to be controversial, but people often say that diabetes is a silent killer. I disagree. That there are signs and symptoms that happen with diabetes, some of them being irritability, more urination, right? Diabetic coma, diabetic shock, drowsiness, thirst, desire to drink more, and eventually numbness and tingling, right? Well, those aren't silent signs. These are signs that happen that we can choose to look at or ignore. Same thing with the disease of addiction. And we can break them down into those four categories. Biological, physically, there are going to be signs and symptoms in the forms of potentially withdrawal or physical signs that we see when people use. Psychologically is another way to say mentally and emotionally that we're going to see, and we're going to expand upon more, is a big thing that happens why treatment should be long-term. Mm-hmm. And socially, this is the everyday life, people, places, and things, that people often go back to their same situation or think that they can, I'm not drinking anymore, but I'll play Keno in a liquor store. Mm. Not the wisest decision. The whole saying that if you go to a barber shop, you'll eventually get your hair cut. Mm-hmm. Part of what we did is, okay, let's not just stress the physical and detox. That's what a detox facility is for. Is let's stabilize you. Let's make sure the alcohol is enough out of your system so that way your brain can heal and you can start making changes. So residential treatment, partial hospitalization programs, IOPs, relapse prevention programs, these are part of the continuum to help you identify physical, mental, emotional, social, and for a lot of people, spiritual ways to continue that healing process. Mm-hmm. I say it this way, that the way, even where I'm at in my sobriety, because this is a chronic disease, this is a chronic healing treatment long-term, that the way I think, the way I feel can get me closer to a drink or drug or farther away. Mm-hmm. The way I act or react could potentially get me closer to a drink or drug or farther away.
Yeah.
So that's part of my treatment today. I look at the psychological, the emotional, the environmental to go, gosh, am I getting more serenity and peace? Or am I wanting to feed my my inability to cope, which we'll expand upon in this paragraph more.
Yeah. Yeah, on that note, there are a couple of lines that I've heard. You're either swimming or drowning. You're either swimming or drowning. Mm-hmm. Or a tree is either growing or dying. Mm-hmm. So that really emphasizes the need for growth, because recovery is all about change, mm-hmm. Growth, hope, all the positive thing. But I want to circle back to the beginning, which is also in my journey that was helpful, is that what you were saying, that you cannot pinpoint an event or blame something, that's why I have this. And that really interests me because it coincides with my Buddhist belief too, is that it's something that you're born with. So like if there is a person born in a third world country and the same person born in a very developed country, that person who is born in the third world country cannot be like, it's not fair, you know? So it's not his fault that he's born in that country, but at the same time, he can be responsible and he can take responsibility to get better, you know? So I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I would like to look at it from a positive point of view that, you know, the example that I have heard of in Buddha's story is that when you get shot by an arrow, the arrow has already pierced into your skin, into your flesh. You don't need to go find out who shot it first before you take it out. It's more important to take it out. The arrow's already in. So that's the same thing with addiction too, because I have seen many people, and myself included, like, why do I have this? You know, I need to figure out how it all started. If I find out, it'll be gone. But it's more about, how do I treat this, you know? But
if I could piggyback off that, once again, I struggled with that being a 20-year-old kid, and I took pride of not being the quote-unquote stereotypical addict or alcoholic, right? I always thought I got by, that I didn't do all the behaviors that other people do, which why when I went into treatment, and I at the time I had a felony charge for carrying copious amounts of substances for potentially selling, and when I went into that inpatient treatment facility and they did the intake assessment and I lied my butt off. Somehow they still knew I was appropriate for inpatient treatment. But while I was in there, that was one of my biggest questions, right? I don't have addiction in my family, probably in my core family in the second or third generation before me. And I always asked why. Why am I an addict? Why am I an alcoholic? And can I be that? And for me, part of the conditions while I was at that inpatient, that the rest of the community members were great with me. Somehow, most of them seemed to think I was, but not force that, and just gave me the piece to feel comfortable. And when I went into that inpatient setting, I felt comfortable, even though I didn't think I was an addict. Right? That even though I would look at my earlobes with my family and go, maybe I'm adopted. I didn't feel comfortable in a lot of situations, including my family. And even though I didn't think at first I was an addict or an alcoholic, I just had a felony charge. I felt comfortable. And during my time there, I was reading some of the literature, and at first I would compare out, right? I said, well, I did this, I did that, but I can't be an alcoholic because I didn't do that yet. And someone told me, why don't you start comparing in as opposed to comparing out? And I remember reading some of the literature, and it was in the middle of the page, and it was, I'll call it a spiritual experience, or an aha moment or a light bulb moment. And the sentence that I was reading, these letters around it just moved, and the words just popped out right at me like it was 3D. And the words said, because I'm an alcoholic. And my question became my answer. That acceptance of what, how, why, it's not fair. I had this level of acceptance, and I was able to feel comfortable with having the disease of addiction. It was parallel for me saying that I'm an alcoholic, and in 12-step language, it's I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol, and my life has become unmanageable. They were all parallel for me at that time. And it was freeing.
Yeah, that relates back to the word primary, because it's actually good news. Once you accept it and you treat it, everything else fall into places. So, I like that. But I do have a couple of questions, know, based on your background and your expertise. Because, the paragraph also talks about the reward and the motivation and the relief. So it also sounds like adjusting your lenses, because we use the word abnormal in the beginning, which also implies that there is such thing as normal. So an addict will respond to events, triggers, inputs, all kinds of inputs abnormally, So that also means that if he or she can get to a place where they respond appropriately, then they are in recovery, So like, how do you help people get to that place?
And that's a great realization in bringing that up. And part of addiction is we have a new normal, right? That brain dysfunction changes over time, and there's this part of the brain called the pleasure center, and that's that dopamine hit. I don't really hear it too much nowadays, but people used to say, "Oh man, that's really dope," meaning that's really good or that's really cool or whatever it is, and it's a legitimate saying, because what happens when we do pleasurable things, whether it's eating a meal, exercising, sex, making a goal, reaching a timeline, accomplishing something, you get a dopamine release among other neurotransmitters, which dopamine is one of them that makes us feel good. So what we do with these chemicals is we get a powerful hit, and then we go, oh, I like that. And we continue to take these substances, and it becomes our go-to for feel good. Right? So that's our new normal when it comes to that brain reward, motivation, memory and related circuitry. So us being in Baltimore, hey, the Ravens won. Let's go get messed up. Mm-hmm. The Ravens lost. Let's go get messed up. So that becomes the new, we rewire our brain to go, not only do I want this, but my brain begins to think, I need this. And then that whole choice becomes challenging. Yes, the choice to actually ingest it, smoke it, put it in your body is a choice. But where it's not, the brain is telling you, I want and need this. And as the progression happens, people know that I'm not going to feel good from using, but at least I'm going to feel different when I use. So to change that, that's where treatment comes into play, and it's so vital. To be able to go, I need to learn how to cope in a different way, because, man, I used to get a hit when I wanted to feel different or feel good. And now that go-to coping mechanism is gone. So part of treatment and recovery we see with substance use is we need to create a healthy foundation for people to process and identify what they're actually feeling. And when they can identify what they're feeling, how do I act and react in a different way so I don't get closer to a drink or drug? Which is why, yes, COVID is a pandemic, but I've been dealing with as a addictions counselor and clinical director and helping people in therapy. I've been dealing with an epidemic and pandemic for a long time. Mm-hmm. We just threw COVID on top of it, and now they go, oh, just function like you did before. So when people would spend 30, 60, 90 days in a treatment facility, and we throw them right back to work or throw them right back into their life, I often give the example of when people leave treatment facility, that they were in a safe cocoon for 30 to 90 days, if they're lucky. And now you're going back on the fast-moving train called life. Now cope. Part of treatment is collectively helping these people get the help they need with all aspects of that, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, environmentally. And that's why I'm a thumper for continuing treatment and being able to process that.
Yeah. And then, like you connect that with the idea of collectiveness as well, is that, which is what you touched earlier in the conversation about the, I guess I interpreted it as like a sense of belonging aspect, because there's an idea of, since it's a disease of the mind, there's also an idea of otherness, that, oh, I am alone, I'm in this by myself, So when there is a group, there's a sense of like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. And that was also a turning point in my own personal journey as well. But then the change has to, I guess, they all work together, both internal and external, but the external community can be helpful too, because like you were talking about, like, this is how I cope with life and this is what I'm used to, but to change to something else, where do I get the muscle for that? So but when there is a group of people who have further along that journey, they'll be like, yes, we have gone through what you're going through, and it is possible, Mm-hmm. So
and it's so tough for the client who's experiencing this phase of treatment or recovery in the early process to make sense of all this, right? Because part of it is, I just want to stop, or my family thinks I need to stop, or the legal system tells me to stop. So, and it's that manifestation, it's the dysfunction in these aspects that makes it so challenging to do so. The brain damages from top to bottom. So what I mean by that we have these, I'll say 3 parts of the brain. I'm keeping this very simple. And the top part of the brain, or the forward part of the brain, is called the cerebral cortex. What that's responsible for is ration, logic, and reasoning, and forward thinking. So as we abuse substances, we literally damage that part of the brain first. Well, that's really challenging when I'm struggling with my life as a direct result of these substances, and what part of the brain do I use to try to get myself through life? The ration, logic, and reasoning part, right? So the medical model says there's dysfunction with the cerebral cortex. You're literally damaging your brain from substance use. When you go through detox, it literally means to remove toxins, remove poisoning, right? So when we use as much as we do, needing a residential or detox facility, we're killing ourselves with the substances. We're poisoning our body and our mind and our brain. So they come to treatment and they go, I think I'm okay. I got this. I'll just stop using. And the part of the brain that is damaged is the rational logical part of the brain. Now, how does Alcoholics Anonymous say that? Step 1. They say, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. That's a parallel with the medical model that says you're damaging the part of the brain that is responsible for healthy ration, logic, and reason. They go hand in hand.
Yeah. And you used the word new normal earlier too. That's also another thing, because I mean, I truly believe that everybody wants to be happy, but then we can also find happiness through wrong means, you know. So like,
we'll find a way. We'll adapt somehow.
Yeah. So like your wording of new normal also implies new happiness in a way that I'm looking for joy, I'm looking for reward, I'm looking for relief from any kind of pain, mostly mental, emotional pain. Yes. And I have found relief in this behavior, in this substance, and that's what I'm used to. And that's all I trust. But then when somebody else is like, actually, you know, that's not working out. So that's also another thing that has helped me in my life, and also that I have seen in the community, is that people need to find joy in recovery. Otherwise, why are you even sober, you know? So that's also another thing where that adjusting of these lenses can be helpful. That because we're all looking for that happiness again. So if I have stopped and then if I'm miserable, I'm just going to go back to it because, why did I stop altogether? But then if you got sober and if you are in recovery and if you have found joy, which is more sustainable, you're like, actually, this is much better than the high that I got, which was short-lived and I crashed.
I needed to find that new normal. And being a 20-year-old going, am I never going to use substances again? is kind of a brain twist. And I remember a couple weeks, months, I don't know how long in my recovery journey, but I remember leaving a meeting and going home to my parents, and it was summer, and they have a house and it's a split level, and I was depressed, and I was just void of happiness. I remember my mom looked at me and she said, "What's wrong?" It was a Friday night, summer, right? We're downtown Annapolis. It's hopping. I'm 20. I could be going, to bars in the near future. I had my fake IDs and stuff before then. And then I just went, oh, is this what sobriety feels like? And 3 roads down, I had 5 to 15 friends, right? And I knew they were getting messed up. And I knew they were getting high. And I knew they were getting drunk. And I was missing that. And in that 15, 20-minute conversation with my mom, and she's up in the steps and I'm right by the door. I'm just like isolated. I don't feel connected. I don't feel part of anything except it's a Friday night, it's summer, and I'm not getting messed up and I'm depressed. And at some time during that connection and that communication with my mom, I had one of those aha moments, and I realized, wait a minute, 3, 4 roads down, I know exactly what my friends are doing, what they're doing, when they're doing it, and how they're doing it. I know an hour from now what substance they're going to be using. I know 2 hours from now the half of them are going to be passed out. And then it kind of had this epiphany, aha moment of going, what am I really missing? And as I got sober, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, especially the next summer, I knew what they were doing, when they were doing it, and how they were doing it, minus one person who had a legal charge, another person, and I wasn't missing it. I was missing not feeling depressed and numb, and I wanted to feel different, and I wanted to connect. And during that conversation with my mom, I realized, oh, wait a minute, that's Groundhog's Day. Mm-hmm. I don't know what my new normal is yet, but am I really going to miss that? And it was such an aha moment, which began to rewire my brain to think and feel differently. And did I feel great in that moment? No. But did I have that, wait a minute, rational logic reason part of the brain began to think in just a little bit different way, and I didn't need to numb out in that moment. Mm-hmm. And I got to hear my mom, and I don't know if I connected like, great, I feel wonderful, thanks Mom, love you. It wasn't that, but I was able to, in that isolative moment, go, oh, there could be a new normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting about the rational part of the brain is that it's hard to admit for an addict, myself included, that I might be wrong, you know. So like with that rational thinking thing is that, you know, what I struggle with the most, which also I've seen, is that the difference between restriction and freedom. And I love the freedom. So when I see other people doing these things, I'm like, I am limited. I cannot do that anymore, which is also coming from that rational part of the mind, thinking that I am being restricted. But actually in recovery, I'm actually given more freedom because those behaviors and substances were restricting me to find joy, the new normal in life. So like I really like that imagery that you use of you know, feeling isolated and feeling a little restricted too because you see your friends doing that, but then like, why am I tied to this? But actually the opposite. So that's also another cool thing about recovery and the community and the collectiveness too, is that I cannot get to that mind state by myself, which is kind of like performing my own brain surgery. I cannot do that, you know? Yes. So that's really cool too about restriction and freedom. And I have a philosophy teacher who said something that I will always remember because when I, you know, what was attracting about the United States, being from Burma, is the idea of freedom, you know, democracy, all these things. But he said something that is still with me, is that freedom is great, but freedom comes with responsibility. Mm-hmm. So if I am actually free because of recovery, because I thought it was a restriction, but now I'm actually free, but then freedom needs responsibility. What that means to me is that I need to do these things, like find joy, be responsible, and I guess in 12-step terms, they call it the maintenance, spiritual maintenance in a way. So yeah, going back to what you were saying too, it's either I am drowning or I'm swimming, and I would rather be swimming and engage in life. So that's what we do here, of to be a little open-minded, to be a little curious that my thinking might be wrong. I'm not sure, but I might be wrong, you know. But then what's the other alternative? I can figure that out on my own, even if I admit that I'm wrong. But then when you have a therapist or a coach, you'll be like, yeah, what is it that you're seeing that I cannot see? And then you partner with that view, and then you're like, oh, actually, I was wrong, and I'm okay with that because I have found something better.
And that's part of getting to the new normal. And as this definition said, dysfunction in these circuits lead to characteristic bio, psychosocial, and spiritual manifestations. If it's a manifestation, that means it's obvious, evident, and apparent. But who is it obvious, evident, and apparent to first? Our loved ones, our family members, our coworkers, our spouses are so obvious, evident, and apparent that there's these dysfunctions to other people and not to us at first. Mm-hmm. And to be able to get hit with that I call it that spiritual 2x4 of going, oh, how did I not see that before? Takes a community and a tribe or a treatment center or therapist or a 12-step program to help us see what we do not see yet so we can get to that new normal.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, though, about this paragraph. This is just the first paragraph. It is so packed.
So packed.
Yeah.
It's a powerful paragraph then, and we'll close with this last sentence of this first paragraph. This is reflected in an individual pathologically, we'll break that word down, pursuing reward and or relief by substance use and other behaviors. So when you think of the word pathological, we often hear pathological related to pathological liars, right? Oh, they're a pathological liar. Pathological in a medical term means manifesting behavior that is habitual, maladaptive, and compulsive. So habitual means pattern, habit-forming behavior, right? Maladaptive, bad, and compulsive, reactionary, right? So these behaviors, because of the substance use and the damage that's doing to the brain, second nature, habitual, right? We don't think about it. People say, man, I use and I don't know why, or I'm doing these unhealthy coping skills and I don't know why. And then maladaptive, they're not healthy, and compulsive or reactionary. So once again, that need for that tribe or that community or that treatment center or that outpatient or that therapist is we're not trying to be so reactionary where we do not feel good and then we want to numb out or feel better.
Yeah, I think that definitely is a good note to close on. But I also want to add one more thing positive, which is that I guess we can revisit this too, in the future. But I wanted to close out with this, which is the word recovery. What we are known by is Recovery Collective, and I love that word recovery a lot because there are so many aspects to it. Because like we used as an example in the beginning, if somebody broke his leg, he needs to be in recovery, and once he has recovered, he's back to normal. But the cool thing about recovery from addiction, recovery from a mental health, is that when you recover, it's not a factory reset. It's like a brand new car, that it goes beyond the original state of mind. And that to me is the motivation and enthusiasm that I have for myself and for other people who are struggling. They're not going back to the factory reset. They're actually entering a new version of them that they've never imagined before, which has occurred to me as well. So that to me already is a great reward and motivation because I have seen, powerful transformations, in our community. So that is an inspiration for me, and hopefully that is an inspiration for other people too. We're recovering into depression, we're recovering into something vibrant, something more alive, and become very, very useful in the community. So that's the note that I want to end on.
Yeah, it's great. And because substance use is so insidious that, yes, we're recovering from the maladaptive negative manifestations. And we hear people all the time say, I just want to get back to where I was. But what's happening is you're cutting yourself short. You get so much more from not just putting down a drink or a drug and no longer using, but this first paragraph shows us that, man, we get better in so many aspects, that we evolve, we change. Our brain changes the way we think, process. Not only do we not get closer to a drink or drug, but our ability to cope with emotions and make sense of things in a healthy way is just powerful. So it's why often people say, I'm a grateful addict or alcoholic, because not only am I not using, I've turned into a person that I like to be and that I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke. I got a little fired up towards the end of the episode. I really like the energy that you have carried with you in this conversation. So
thank you. We jumped around in a good way, and we got part 2 coming of the definition for next time. So thanks so much for listening, and if you've got any feedback for us, please let us know in the comments wherever you're listening. And we'd really appreciate if you like and comment and subscribe and join us next week.
Awesome. Talk to you next time.
Sounds good.